Sam, if you were on, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I can just kind of open up and get going.
You can go right ahead.
Perfect. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending this public outreach meeting. Just wanted to mention a few things. Basically, if you could mute your mic and hold off on comments during the presentation, we'll definitely have an open opportunity towards the end to solicit some feedback and get your input. This is the third public outreach meeting, so I wanted to go over a few things, including a project status update, go over some of the community feedback items that we've received, talk a little bit about sea level rise, more of an update on a development plan, and then the last kind of final steps is moving forward. This is a kind of reminder of the port's mission statement. So creating economic opportunities by connecting Thurston County to the world by air, land, and sea. Just want to remind you of kind of where we're at and how we're moving forward with this destination waterfront development plan. So kind of the three core focus areas are economic opportunities, community assets, environmental stewardship, and how can we integrate that into this plan. We've seen this before on other public outreach meetings, but the kind of vision focus from the Port's 2050 vision plan, including building community awareness, aligned port investments, strengthening partnerships, and establishing port vision focus and impact. And this is a slide for the Internal Association for Public Participation, basically outlining how we are soliciting public feedback throughout this whole process. We're in that involve and collaborate stage, so really wanting to get some more input and feedback from the public out there as we move forward developing this plan. This is the project team. You can see TAS there in the middle, and below us we have the general public, which is you, as well as an advisory group. We'll share some more about them as well as the stakeholders. We also have consultants at the bottom, makers, site work for landscape, SCJ is our civil engineer, and Mott McDonald for any port and coastal engineering that we were looking at. And then we report to Rachel Jameson from the Port of Olympia, who ultimately goes up to Sam Gibney as executive director, and finally up to the commissioners, Joe Downey, Bill McGregor, and EJ Zeta. This is a list of the advisory group members that we've been communicating with through the course of the project, soliciting their feedback and direction on our public outreach meetings and presentations. We, at the recommendation of the commissioners, added these additional 9 advisory group members. And then our select stakeholders. We've reached out to these. These are people we felt are people organizations that are local or kind of adjacent to this development area and had a kind of more direct impact and wanted to get their independent feedback. Here we are in the project schedule. As you can see, we're wrapping up. So we're right there at the second half of January. This is our third public outreach meeting. And then we're basically summarizing all of these comments and assembling everything into a final presentation that we will be sharing with the commissioners on February 8th. So on to community feedback. There was a survey that we sent out a while back, survey number 1. We still have survey number 2 that we're going to get into, but as far as public outreach, we had a few meetings, November 18th, December 16th, and now today, the 20th. Several advisory board meetings, as well as a couple select stakeholder outreach opportunities, and then even some commissioner meeting feedback that we had on the 19th January and then back in 16th of November. So a lot of opportunities for feedback and input moving forward. Survey number 1, we actually closed that one out and had 442 responses. The overall experience rating that we received on that was in that kind of fair, good, great. So out of 1 to 5 was kind of in that ballpark of 3 and 4. That was good to see. And then going through some of the questions that we asked in the initial survey, just wanted to share with you where we're at and what we received. So one of the questions was asking about where are you from, and in the adjacent area, and not just in the Olympia, excuse me, Olympia neighborhoods, but also in the adjacent towns and cities. We've had some input all the way as far down as Vancouver, Washington on survey number 1. So West Olympia, 14.7, that's pretty high up there. Northeast Olympia at 16, rural Olympia at 13. So got a pretty good collection of different neighborhoods and areas that we got some feedback from. We asked the question if the respondents were familiar with the 2050 vision plan, and up to 300 respondents were familiar, and a little over 120 or so were not familiar with the vision plan. Another question we asked was basically the hope, what were your hopes for this waterfront destination development plan will achieve? And all of this data is a compilation. Basically, I think there were 9 different questions that we asked, and a lot of it was open-ended questions. So there's a lot of opportunity for lengthy responses from the public. So what we did is we took all of that information, boiled it down, and tried to distill the essence of each one of those responses. What was a driving point? And if there are multiple points, we would tally those in separate kind of categories. So we tried to get it down to kind of a root word. What was a focus for each of those responses? So here, as far as what we hope this plan would achieve, a lot of feedback in 140 or so comments, tallying up to a community hub, tourist destination, museum. That was a kind of a focus. A lot of interest in open spaces as well for this area. Recreation and access to water was pretty significant. And then, excuse me, kind of in that mid-range, business center or environmental sustainability were some other key terms that tended to pop up. Housing, sailing center, industrial use were also a few other kind of minor mentions, but there was enough that they rose up to be tallied in this chart. This is a question relating to what additional opportunities we should consider for this waterfront destination development plan. Arts and entertainment was pretty high on the list. Business center, mixed use, public access, sailing center, and recreation. All these great public spaces that definitely the public are very interested in having as part of this plan. Housing was also on the list. Lodging, RV park, environmental restoration, sustainability, natural areas, a little bit less than, say, 20 or so responses for that. Education, so that could be public education, cultural, museum type facilities, things like that. Ferry, transportation, industrial, light industrial use, maybe around 10 to 15 responses there. And then a few other kind of minors, but really mentioning parking, renewable energy, and a community swimming pool. That was another one. Another question we asked is ways that we can provide public access to water. So that was part of the 2050 vision plan, and one of the comments there was providing access to water. So we were asking the public what they want to see, how can we realize that into some sort of actionable item. And the top of the list, small boat resource, rental, docks, storage, things like that, or extending the walking trail, providing more access to the water on the walking trail. Worth to mention here is access to water doesn't mean physically in the water, but it could be maybe a trail over the water or allowing more people to get out and enjoy the water itself. Public access, parks, green space, beaches, public plazas, those were also very high listed, maybe 50 or so responses there. Community sailing center or event center, environmental remediation and stewardship was also high on that list. Several respondents mentioned that we already have access to water that already exists. Others wanted to see that in the path of education or museum, or maybe additional moorage and public docks. Parking was another concern, so I think that relates back to how do we get people driving down to the Marina area and looking at places for them to park publicly to actually get out and enjoy those spaces. Some business development, arts and entertainment, recreation, and housing also made it onto this list. This question we asked basically, how should the area look in 30 years? What is the long-term vision for this destination waterfront development area? And top of the list was public access, public space, parks. A lot of comments there. And then some others, business, small business connection to downtown. Those are the top two. And then kind of cluster together those next four: environmental, remediation, restoration, mixed compatible uses, recreation, and tourism. And then additional worthy items to mention: education, museum, nonprofit. Some of these kind of spill over between multiple categories, but housing, arts, entertainment, increasing the marina capacity, and small boat resources. There we see a sailing center pop up again, event space, lodging. Some people said no changes, they don't want to see it, they like the way it is. And then others are familiar with the Ruston Way and they like that. So they mentioned we should be studying that as something to consider. And a couple mentions of a dog park. And then another question: what opportunities would benefit the community? So looking to provide some amenities or assets that the community can benefit from. High on the list: public access and amenities, educational, museum, businesses, small local business, again, arts and entertainment, sailing center, small boat rental and resources. All these are basically, again, public feedback comments that we received and tallied together. Recreation, environmental stewardship, tourism, housing, again, right there around the 18 to 20 range. And then tapering off, we see the increased capacity at the marina, water park or a swimming pool, parking, we see that again. Tribal collaboration, which I'd like to mention, we do have tribal collaboration. We have a representative on our advisory committee that's part of the tribe. And then agriculture. One more question we put out there is just additional thoughts and needs to be considered. So those were the ideas that we had, but we wanted to reach out and make sure we understood if there's anything else that the public had that we wanted to make sure get included in this development plan. High on a list, again, these were all some quite lengthy responses that we had to interpret and boil down into what was the root meaning for each of one of those comments. So collaboration, that was one key item that kept boiling to the top. Maintain awareness of impacts from sea level rise, which is something that we'll address a little bit later in the presentation. Community multi-use space, that could maybe show as a maritime, environmental, or cultural center. We kind of lumped that all together. Ensure environmental and financial sustainability. So how can the port continue to keep the environmental sustainability of the site, but also financial sustainability operationally, making that pencil out. Outdoor public space, dog park, that's something that came up again. And then concerns about tourism accommodations and also concerns about proposed use within context of each site. So that comment we interpreted as basically there are multiple sites in this development plan, and I think the public is concerned about each site and what gets put in on that site. So they just want to make sure that it's the right use that fits well within the context of the whole plan. So survey number 2, this is currently active right now, and we've received over 250 responses, and it does close 10 p.m. tomorrow, the 21st. So if you have an opportunity to go onto the port's website and look at that survey, it'd be great if you could fill that out and provide us more of your input, and also share with others to be able to log in and do that as well. So running through the survey questions, just to give you kind of a flavor of what it is that we've been asking. So this one, thinking about access to water, wanted to rank the following 4 images from being most preferred to least preferred. So when you think about having access to the water and you see these images, which one kind of sticks out to you as most favorable? There's a step bulkhead you see in the top left, top right, a small craft water launch. This was added from a lot of public feedback that we heard earlier on in our outreach opportunities. A bench wall on the bottom left, and then a promenade boardwalk, which you see a picture of a Percival Landing there on the bottom right. Another component was how important is a park with children's play structure for any of these sites. So we're looking at feedback of, is that something that we should include in this development plan, or is it not as critical because there are other park access play areas nearby? Which of these potential shoreline improvement options do you prefer most? Again, you see that image of the bulkhead seawall on the top left. On the top right, a living shoreline, a rock or use of rocks and stones in the bottom left, and then a reinforced option on the bottom right. So all of these are applicable methods that we could use to kind of improve the shoreline. And then we also want to get into aesthetics and feel, get the public's feedback on what kind of style or look that they wanted for some of these buildings. So we asked for the top three. So we're looking at contemporary in the top left, and then going across to the right, a more traditional style, excuse me, a Pacific Northwest vibe with some heavy timber and some glass, a lot of kind of wood earthy tones. Longhouse, so again, kind of relating back to maybe more of a tribal feel or vibe. Bottom left, industrial. Then in the bottom middle, neo-traditional, and then even a craftsman style on the bottom right. So we're soliciting feedback on those particular styles. Here we wanted the public's feedback on paths and connectors within development area. So it's important to get from the water or this development area back to the rest of downtown. And how do you do that? What is the right method? We're looking at boardwalks or a combined bike pedestrian path where they're both sharing the same area. Crushed stone on the bottom left. Paved infill, so maybe there's some areas of the development plan where development pushes close to that edge, so it's kind of infilled, but we do still have maintained that path. Landscape, so a lot of trees and vegetation in that area. Or concrete and open, just a wide concrete path. Pavers, just to give it a little more of a pedestrian character and scale. Separated, you see on the bottom left, so maybe bicycles on one side and pedestrians on the other. Paved and open, so pavement might be more preferred, or even tree lined. Another component we wanted to put some attention to and focus on was the event gathering space. Some feedback on wanting more of those types of features in this development plan. So we're looking for feedback on what that should look like, what the public prefers. So is that an open concrete, kind of like a plaza? Is that indoor and enclosed? Is that a covered wood structure like you see there in the Rose Pavilion at Priest Point Park? Or like a covered steel canopy structure with some picnic tables and benches? Even an open kind of crushed stone feel you see on the far right there. And then we're also looking for feedback on some of the potential gateways or connectors, things that could draw people down the path or connect from downtown to this destination development area. Could that be an informational signage you see on the left, or some sort of beacon, tall tower-like structure that people can see off in the distance and are intrigued by that and want to go down further and see what's out there? Could that be sculptural? And that could be maybe a reference back to tribal or Native American art. And you can see these components kind of scattered throughout the area. That it's a reoccurring theme that continues to ensure the public that they understand they're in this new zone and it's all connected. Other potential connectors or gateways might be an arbor or an arch, something more organic and kind of green. Or on the bottom left, architectural archway. So that's more of a structured, developed, built type feature that people can see, and that's the gateway that you transition to from one neighborhood or zone into the next. Could it be artistic markings, something on the concrete or the sidewalk along the path that, again, it's a visual reminder that kind of reassures you that you're headed down this path and it's all connected together. Possibly an open plaza. You can see on the right that's something you can see off in the distance of a gathering of people that might pique your interest and draw you down closer into that area. I'll take a minute and address sea level rise. So this is something that we will take care of within each site. So as we progress into the next phase, the port will start to look at the sites individually and come up with solutions that best suit each particular site. So not one solution will be appropriate for all the areas. Example might be at the docks and marinas, a harder edge there versus maybe some longer, skinnier sites that don't have a lot of opportunity for development. That might be a great opportunity for living shoreline type response. So some of these options, just a refresher running through, we have raised streets, so bringing up all the elevation, or raised landscaping. Flood walls might be another one where it's some sort of hard edge that's built up. You can see on the bottom left there, a raised building. So like KGY, for example, that's up on piers out in the water above the flood area. Here's a few examples, images that we've collected showing some of those sea level rise measures. So some hard walls, concrete benches that could be deployed to address that 1 to 2 foot rise of seawater. Some kind of long artistic type images you see on the right of these long curving concrete beams. So there's, again, lots of opportunities for addressing sea level rise on each specific site, depending on their needs. There's another rendering on the bottom left you see of a kind of living shoreline type scenario, or on the right, more of that hard edge seawall. And then up at the top, an example you might see of, I can envision that as a Billy Frank Jr. trail, and then that's at the sea, the water line. But then when sea level rise happens, you have that raised earth barrier to help address the sea level rise. When the waters recede, then that trail goes back to being active again. So within the development plan, moving forward with that, we have broken out the overall development plan into individual sites. So you can see on the bottom left, site A, and it goes all the way up to site K. We do have also a couple of overwater sites on the far left, KGY at the point, and then site overwater site 2 there at the bottom. So this is helpful to start to break out individual lots and locations that we can start to focus on what would be the right application for development to go into those individual lots. We also want to focus on the linkages and how we can get people that are walking down that path along the Billy Frank Jr. Trail to connect back into the downtown, back to the farmers market, back to kind of the core of downtown Olympia, and looking at opportunities to make those paths and connectors, those gateways, those linkages occur in between the individual lots that we were looking at, the sites. And then also just wanted to mention or bring up, we have kind of the major connectors back to downtown. You can see in that the blue arrow. So that's this proposed protected bike lane that the city of Olympia is working on now. So would something along Washington be the major connector that would bring people back and forth in that area? Or if there's more vehicular traffic, is that going to be on Franklin or maybe in Capitol Way? But we see really pulling the people to the north, to the farmers market area, and then having them redirected out to this new destination waterfront area. I want to bring this up because it's showing the walkability of how close this is to downtown. So if you look at kind of central of this new plan and you look at a half-mile radius, that's that second ring from the center. That's maybe a 7 to 10 minute walk from this area. So then looking at someone visiting, they could come to this area and then take a 10-15 minute walk, and they could visit even up to the Capitol campus. So it really is close to downtown. And how can we help emphasize that this is a walkable area and try to reduce the amount of vehicular traffic and impact that might cause. So within breaking out these individual sites, we wanted to create some kind of marketable plans. And Alan, I don't know if you want to take a minute and share on some of these. Hey, Alan, I think you're on mute, or your mic's not working. No. Well, I'll continue on. Feel free to jump in if you can get that connected. So we've broken out individual sites and wanted to propose a few potential uses. So you can see here, site A, for example, this is 93,000 square feet, 2.13 acres. So it's something that Alan can now take and start to market. Alan from the Port of Olympia can take and start to market to potential investors and developers. And so they can kind of understand some of the limitations, for example, what the zoning is. It's urban waterfront, what the allowable heights are. So it's 40 feet. And then we also have some additional requirements that is 25 feet high within the 75 feet of the ordinary high water mark. So and then building setbacks and shoreline setbacks, things that developers have to look at, and then things that we can start to pick up and address on these individual sites moving forward. So currently this site is parking, office building, and undeveloped. And then some potential sites, potential uses that we see for the site might include, you see a hotel there on the bottom left, a sailing or cultural center, a mixed use. So this is where we're starting to put together potential uses, not saying that this is going to be the end all use for this site. It's just, these are some potential uses, and the port is definitely staying open to the idea of additional uses or opportunities if those were to come up. Here's another example of site D. This is something that Port's considering putting their admin building on. Again, 264,000 square feet, a little over 6 acres. So potential admin building for that location. Other potential uses might be a mixed use or light industrial. So we've created these individual site blow up sheets, if you will, that all the way from A through K, just as some examples and potential uses for each of these individual locations. This is site E, 147,000 square feet, a little over 3.39 acres. And currently it is used as the Marina office. There's some parking and some dry storage, as well as a portion of this is undeveloped. So one potential use might be an RV resort for this location, mixed use, light industrial, or potential sailing center. Again, we're looking at opportunities for development. So we're trying to solicit public feedback and get input on what these sites can hold, and then ultimately come up with the best use for these sites moving forward. Here is another potential site that we're looking at, Overwater Site 2. You see there on the top, that's the old abandoned Stalkop Marina. And some potential uses there might be commercial, like a seafood company with an attached restaurant, for example, museum, cultural center, combined overwater site. When I say combined overwater site, there's limited opportunity for overwater development. And we also have overwater site 1. So we could take basically the area of this overwater site, combine that with overwater site 1, and then kind of relocate, if you will, the overwater area to a different location that we could use for new development. You see across the bottom, again, some reference images, things that might be able to go into these types of locations to kind of, I guess, spark some creativity or ideas of what could be located there. So then this, moving forward, I'd like to open it up to some public input and feedback. Before I do, I'd like to kind of tally or check in with Sam, and if Alan had any other things to say, see if there's anything we wanted to share. And then as far as comments go from the public, you can definitely speak out. And then we'll also have chat comments going as well. So if you want to send out a chat message, you want to hear what you have to say and get your input.
Great, thanks, Amos. That was a great presentation. And so anxious to hear questions or comments that the public may have. And yeah, just open the floor up. We are monitoring the chat board too. So if you have questions there, you can post them or comments, and we'll either answer them in the chat or bring them and answer them verbally.
Can I speak up first? My name is Dave Bonato. Hopefully you all can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to put a bug in the port's ear, the planner's ear, that a sailing center, you all are being responsive by sort of putting it into site A and site E, but probably the most preferred site would be the OW2 site, just because it's access to deep water. And otherwise, those other sites, you're launching into a mud flat, or you're trying to get out to a saleable area. So hopefully, some of the planning and consideration for a sailing center can be on that OW2 site. So thanks a lot.
Great, thank you for that comment. And I also wanted to mention that the commission has requested that we add some additional meetings. And so and we have done that. We have those scheduled for both our advisory panel as well as public meetings. And Amos, if you put that slide up, we can talk to that.
Sure.
Great. So we will be having an additional advisory group meeting on February 10th. Those meetings are open to the public for you to listen. We don't necessarily take public comment at those because we're really hoping to hear from the advisory group members then. We will have a presentation back of what we've heard and kind of how we have synthesized all of this data and ideas. And so we'll be going back to the advisory group on the 24th of February. And then we'll have an additional public outreach meeting on March 4th. We'll note that we might change that date. If we do, we'll make sure that we both put that out on Facebook and on our website, just so we have a little bit more time in between that meeting and then going back on to the commission for the presentation of the final report of this on March 8th. So there might be a slight change on this. Please stay tuned for that, but we are going to have some additional outreach and try to incorporate as much community input as we can.
And Sam, we'd probably be posting that to the port's website for this project.
That is correct. Yes.
We also have an email list going of people that have expressed
Great.
interest that we'll issue that out by email
Great.
as well.
Okay.
This is Steve Brand, and I can offer an additional comment. I think the planning group is going a great direction. I just wanted to offer a little suggestion about making sure to integrate the way the walking trails and the different segments of planning areas work together. I personally would like to see sort of a distribution of focal points and more opportunities for the mixed use along the way. Specifically, I was looking at the idea of a hotel at the end. Is that site A? And you know, if we're doing something like that there, I think that's a great idea. But you know, some place to also sit, and you know, some interior space. It is the Northwest where you know, this time of year people do walk the site, but it would be interesting and enjoyable to have some opportunity for coffee. And I mean, that's a great spot to have some window seating and that kind of thing. Also, in terms of looking at the options, the shoreline options that were presented, the treatments were mostly hardened treatments, and I was thinking a soft armoring option would be my preference, something where that's possible to allow for something a little less hardened, but still offer a somewhat natural shoreline, anchored logs and that kind of thing. I think that's my comment. Thank you.
My name is Tony Sinclair. I've been kind of watching for some time and sent out to a couple of the members today a project concept for our estuary to be able to determine the water quality. I sent out a PowerPoint presentation to some of you. I'd like to, you know, put that in as consideration. Also, several years ago, I visited Vancouver, British Columbia, and one of their museums, they had some of their Native Americans there carving totems. So a thought or an idea would be to have either the Nisquallies or Squaxins be involved with some type of cultural center where they could be carving and showing individual carvings and how they go about it. So a few ideas like that would be great.
This is Bob Jacobs. Can you hear me?
Yes, Bob.
Yeah, okay. I was disappointed to hear talk about buildings going on Site A. You didn't say anything about Site B. I assume that might be the case there as well. I'd suggest that you spend some time and see how these areas are now being used. They're very, very heavily used by the public. We drove out there. It's our favorite lunch spot. You take your sandwich out there and you look out over the water out to the Olympics, and it's just gorgeous. And then have a walk after lunch. The last time we were out there a week or two ago, the entire parking area along the shore side was filled with cars, absolutely filled. I think that is the prime public use spot in the entire county, as far as something like a park or something similar. So it stays open and it stays available to the public. And I strongly urge that that be used for this area.
Great. Thank you, Bob.
I'd like to add on to David's comments about deepwater access on the Bud side for launch of sailing vessels and all that. And some of us from the Maritime Heritage Association have been meeting with our sailing colleagues, but there are also rowing colleagues and paddleboard colleagues and all of that. But related to the deepwater access at the old Stall Cup Marina site, that is a good site for heritage vessels, for example. If there are some heritage vessels in the water that could be located there, that would be a good spot for it. Although Sandman is located at the south end of Percival Landing, it may have to be relocated someday. So the Stallcup site would be a natural for 1 or 2 or 3 in-water heritage vessels. The other use of that site is for research vessels. If we're talking about the estuarium and marine science, there's a need, I think, for vessels to get kids and people out on the water to perform marine science experiments, activities, to be closer to the water. So in addition to sailboats, I think there's a need for other types of deep water moorage and access to Bud Inlet and into Puget Sound through heritage vessels, active on-water vessels, and so forth, and so on. And so that, I just wanted to add on to David's comments. I approve of what he's proposing.
Great, thank you, Chuck.
Yep.
Sam, there was a question I saw earlier about, is there a possibility to extend the closing date of survey number 2 to next week? If you wanted to address that, or it's just something that we can consider and discuss.
Yeah, I think that is, there's a bit of a technical question in there for Jenny, if she's on the line, if given that it was set to close so soon, whether we could actually modify that technically. Jenny, are you?
Actually, I'm in control of that, and yes, technically we do have the ability to modify those dates.
Yeah, I think especially since we have extended some additional public meetings and things, I think we can extend that.
Okay. So we will issue a comment, and maybe post something on the Porch website as well, disregarding what the new close date would be for that.
Yeah, let's go. Let's see, like looking at my dates. I want to make sure that we have time to integrate the results. If we keep it open for another week, will that give us enough time to analyze the results?
I believe so. I think we could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Another question I see from Bob. So what did the survey show, and how will the Port of Olympia use public input? It seemed that there's more focus on construction and RV and dog parks than environmental protection, e.g. natural shorelines.
Yeah, Namus, I put a answer to that in the chat box as well.
Great.
Certainly the port is looking to a balanced approach for both upland development as well as taking into account the sea level rise, as well as some restoration opportunities for the shoreline. So we're open to all those ideas and looking for ways that we can balance it out. So I think that's a real possibility that we'll be able to do some restoration or potentially some softening of the shorelines. And that will be, we'll be looking to our, particularly our state, potentially federal funding partners to help us in that effort.
If there's other comments, feel free to speak up. Otherwise, I'll just keep going down the list of questions in the chat box.
Yeah, so, and I saw one by Karen Fraser that there's definitely, we've seen a lot of interest for what I call mission-driven uses on the peninsula. And I believe that some of the nonprofits and other folks are informally meeting and trying to kind of gel up some of their ideas and see how they might join forces. We're very open to working with them. We do, of course, have constraints on our use of property. And that's one of the things that as we, you know, ports are limited, they're special purpose government. And so we don't have the provision of parks and cultural programs and things specifically in our mission. But when they really align with some of our other missions, we can find some synergy there, I think. But as well as, you know, our primary mission is economic development. And so we do need to look at how we can put the property to economic use and create the creation of jobs, et cetera. Again, I tend to personally look at it as a balanced portfolio approach. And so we welcome those ongoing conversations with our potential partners.
I just wanted to add on also to what Karen has said about the new Arts and Heritage Center downtown that's being looked at in the old fire station. In that heritage and arts facility, we will probably have an opportunity to talk about maritime, Olympia's working waterfront maritime history. So there'd be an opportunity for South Sound Maritime Heritage Association to participate in that project. In addition, the port is going to build an administrative center building. And like the Port of Everett, there is a heritage waterfront history interpretive segment in the port's administration building. So we have opportunity. I don't think we really need a separate maritime museum, which has been talked about for years in Olympia, because we can integrate into what the port is doing and what the Arts and Heritage Alliance is proposing. So I think those are good opportunities for collaboration and partnerships where we can all gain if we just don't focus on, well, I've got to have a separate facility for my particular function. And I think we can do that through collaboration.
Indeed, Mr. Fowler, and I believe that as we look to design the building for our Marina office and things, as we look at multifunctional spaces and how we might be able to share spaces, you know, we're already kind of thinking ahead to some of those things. So, you know, I think there's you know, lots and lots of opportunity for collaboration and sharing of resources to really get some good economies of scale.
Thank you.
Another comment from Bob Butts. In the Port Commissioner's presentation, there was a slide that proposed adding additional areas to the planning process, including a small portion of the northwest corner of the terminal. This would make a sailing center, small boat resource site. So we did share with commissioners some additional sites that we thought would be good for them to consider in the kind of long-term vision, but those particular sites are not part of this scope or development process, development plan. Let's see, what other comments do we have in the chat windows? Steve Brand, I think there's a need for a hand launch site access at most tides. We've got Tony Sinclair, who's proposed an additional project, which he actually got on and talked about. So we've got that documented. Karen Fraser agrees with the hand launch suggestion as well, and would enable lots of people to better enjoy southern Bud Inlet. Question from Bob Butts again. Has the port explored the cost and potential funding sources for removing the creosote pilings left from the old marina? Sam, do you want to address that one?
I'm not sure exactly what site that he's referring to. So
I think that's Overwater Site 2, the old abandoned Stalco.
I don't believe that we have investigated that thus far and have retained that as an overwater site at this point. That's not to say that it couldn't be considered in any type of redevelopment scenario, either removal or sleeving.
comment from Michael. I appreciate the thinking of how to bring to the waterfront uses that would attract the community in a variety of uses, nonprofit, mission-driven agencies, public spaces, investment and job generation, and a good tie into the existing structure of downtown Olympia. So I think, again, Sam spoke to that as well. And another comment, DK Patton, wouldn't hand launch be the best positioned over by the Boat Works Marina? So I think that's close to site D or C.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, we can definitely take that into consideration for recommendations for those sites. Looks like we have a few more minutes left. If there's any other public comments you want to speak up and talk about, if there's a particular slide you'd like us to go back and look at, we can do that as well. Oh, it looks like Karen responded to that previous question about the boat launch in the Works Marina area and just the concern about safety away from vehicles and motorized boats. So definitely something needs to be coordinated as far as the right location for that.
Amos, it looks like somebody has their hand up too.
Okay. Is that Bob?
Yep. Mhm.
Bob, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As a scientist, I'm still confused at how these survey results will be used. Let me play devil's advocate a little bit here. It seems like the port already knows what it wants to do. And I'm not sure how this survey, since it sounds like it's going to be another week before these results are tabulated. But all I've heard is a balanced approach, but I haven't heard anything about how the survey would inform that quote unquote balanced approach. If everybody, for example, says they want natural shorelines and less development, will that just get ignored or will that be incorporated somehow?
I can take that one, Amos. And so definitely the comments are being incorporated into the planning efforts. And you, I believe, have all three of the commissioners that are listening in on this. You know, when I talk about a balanced approach, the commission does need to make decisions, weighing its mission against what the you know, a portion of the public is saying that it's wanted. So this isn't a rating exercise, if I can make that clear. So we're not, you know, asking people to rank their priorities. We're asking people to give us input that really then helps us to sort through what are the allowable uses, what are the financial impacts from that, what are the public benefits from different development, and to come up with development scenarios that do try to balance those. So I hope that answers your question, is that the survey was not some type of a ranking or a rating exercise. There's a way to gather data in a qualitative form that can help inform both staff and the commission's thinking and decision making.
No, that doesn't answer my question, because we were ranking stuff. I mean, I did the survey, and I'm just wondering how it's more than qualitative. It could be quantitative. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm not, as a scientist, I'm not seeing the follow through here between your guys' ideas, pre-planned ideas versus how that might change based on public input. I'm not seeing that connect.
Yeah, so again, what we're planning on doing is then synthesizing this data and then coming back at the future public meetings and advisory group meetings, so that we can then demonstrate this is what we've heard, this is how it has affected our thinking and our proposals. So we'll be reporting back out on that.
Okay, thanks. But you kind of make it sound like you got everything figured out yet, but I don't think that's the case. But that's okay as mm-hmm. long as that process is followed through. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
So I think we have a couple more minutes, a few more comments. Over our site, south of Hearthfire and the shoreline to the south, which already has a boat ramp, would be a great place to store and launch small boats. I'd request that the commissioners consider including this area in the planning process. So that's noted. We'll include that in our final package. Native cultural sites, I was referencing to Vancouver is the UBC Museum of Anthropology. We'll look at that as well and see if we get any kind of insight we can pull from that. Comment from Hillary. Thank you for your interest in developing a variety of uses and spaces, what Sam called the portfolio. If we end up with a mix of cultural and mission-driven initiatives, public spaces, businesses, and linkages to downtown, it feels very vibrant and exciting. So thank you for that comment.
Great.
I think before we close, maybe one or two more, one opportunity for additional public input or feedback. I'd be happy to stick around for a little while and respond to any other questions, but we, in interest and respect of people's times, it's coming close to an hour, so we'd like to kind of wrap up and get ready to close out this meeting.
Great. I'd like to thank everyone for attending again this evening. I know people have choices of how they can spend an evening. So thank you for your interest, and we hope you will join us at our next meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, Sam and Amos, I think I'm seeing
that's it.
people knock off here, so I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and end the meeting.
Okay, great.
All right, have a good night.
Thanks, Jenny.
Jenny, all right.
Bye now.